The Islamic terrorists, ISIS, in Iraq, have now their own weapon of mass destruction. What is it? It's a dam, and possibly they're looking for others as well. Well, the dam around Mosul, if it breaks, could unleash a monstrous wave of water more than 60 feet high.
That's right, Pat. The dam is so poorly built, it may even collapse on its own if it isn't properly maintained. Chris Mitchell brings us the story from Erbil, the capital of Kurdistan.
When ISIS swallowed up large swaths of territory, they also captured what might be the biggest weapon of all in Iraq, the country's largest dam. The nightmare scenario for the world has been when a terror group gets their hands on a weapon of mass destruction. Now, just about a 2-hour drive from here in Erbil, northern Iraq, ISIS has done just that. When they captured the Mosul Dam, experts knew the group had a new weapon of terror.
We told this dam like atomic bomb.
Kurdish civil engineer Adwa Jaji warns the Mosul Dam, once called the most dangerous dam in the world in the best of times, now represents a ticking time bomb in the hands of ISIS.
I think now it's too dangerous. Even it is not blasted by ISIS, the dam will destroy itself because there is nobody there to rehabilitate it.
Jaji says the dam was built on poor soil, needs a regular infusion of grout to stabilize it, and was poorly designed.
The dam is not designed to resist this type of earthquake.
If ISIS fails to maintain the dam, it could burst. Located above Mosul, he says that would be a catastrophe and send a wall of water 60 feet high towards Mosul and reach all the way to Baghdad.
Maybe 500, 600,000 people will be killed in one day.
Jaji feels an international effort should be made to recapture and secure the dam. Even if ISIS does not destroy it, they could hold the country hostage with the threat of an ecological disaster. In the meantime, the U.S. continued its humanitarian airdrops for the stranded Yazidis and its airstrikes against ISIS positions. Peshmerga commanders on the front lines told CBN News when they take over a town, ISIS comes in like a lamb but turns into a wolf.
First of all, they don't do anything. They say calm down until things get better. And then, when they have full control of an area, then they start killing people.
They threatened this Iraqi working in a power plant.
They said if you personally are not giving back the electricity, we will destroy your family.
Their barbarism is also spreading from one generation to the next. This picture of an Australian boy with the head of a Syrian soldier has gone viral. The boy's father, an ISIS fighter, said, "That's my boy."
It's just so hard to hear all these stories and imagine a human being doing this. You know, it's so hard. It's the work of the devil.
Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Erbil, Kurdistan.
Thanks, Chris. The nations of the earth who are committed to freedom need to get together and crush ISIS. They need to destroy ISIS. I mean, not play with them, not bring them to justice before a tribunal, but they need to be destroyed. They are monsters, animals, and the barbarism knows no end. I've heard the Yazidis, and it may not be true, but I'll pass it on because I heard it on a radio broadcast that 500 people, I believe, were buried alive by these monsters. But look, that dam is built so poorly. It is the worst dam in the world, and it holds back millions of tons of water. Now, we have a graphic that I want to show you how it works. You see how that thing happens. It goes through Mosul, then it goes all the way down to Baghdad with this wall of water that comes out of this dam if it ruptures. And from what I gather, reading about it, it has to be maintained on virtually a daily basis with so-called grout because the material that they built the dam with is permeable, and the water flows through it, and it leaks out, and it has no stability. So they have to put this grout, well, it's kind of like cement in there to stabilize it. And if they don't maintain it, it will fall of its own weight. But if they decide to get cute and blow it up, it will be an ecological disaster. And as the gentleman said, several 100,000, 600,000 people could die as a tsunami of about 70 feet of water comes flowing down that valley. You saw how it works. And that's just one more thing that, you know, you just ask, if only we had built up the Peshmerga when we had a chance, if only we had not run away from Iraq but have had a status of forces of agreement, if only we had not backed this feckless Maliki as prime minister, if only we had had statesmanship in Iraq, we wouldn't be facing these problems now. But now we have an organization that is growing by leaps and bounds. It wants to take over that whole Fertile Crescent. It wants to take over Jordan. It wants to destroy Israel. It wants to destroy all the nations around that part of the world, and very possibly would move against Turkey or move against Iran if such is possible. So it's not a good thing. Well, on this program, there is some good news coming out of Iraq. Kurds from Syria have rescued Iraqi refugees who've been stranded on a mountaintop. John Jessup has that story from our CBN News Bureau in Washington. Here is John.
Pat, the Yazidi refugees were stranded for more than a week with little food or water after Islamic State fighters forced them from their homes. But now Syrian Kurdish fighters have been able to get them out of danger, carving out a pathway to safety. Gary Lane has that story.
Weak and dehydrated, some of the Yazidis rescued from Iraq's Sinjar mountain have made it safely to this refugee camp just inside Syria. Many, like this little girl, needed immediate medical attention. Her feet blistered from the long, shoeless journey up and down the mountain.
The situation in the camp is still kind of primitive. We're trying to improve it, to make it better, to increase the tents. Lots of people are without tents. Toilets need to be increased to take out the numbers. For now, the estimated number is 12,000 persons.
Some of the elderly fell on the mountainside while fleeing the Islamic State militants. They're being treated for broken bones. The United Nations says as many as 150,000 more Iraqi refugees may arrive here within the next several days. A growing number of Iraqis, especially Christians, are seeking asylum in the West. The new head of the Anglican Church in Australia, Archbishop Philip Freer, says the Australian government should emulate France in granting asylum requests. And Justin Welby, the Anglican Archbishop of Canterbury, suggests the world can no longer turn a blind eye to the rising persecution of Christians.
What is happening right now in northern Iraq, though, is off the scale of the human terror that we've seen over recent years.
Meanwhile, the French say they're now sending arms to the Kurdish military. And U.S. Secretary of Defense Chuck Hagel says the Pentagon will beef up its presence in northern Iraq.
The president has authorized me to go ahead and send about 130 new assessment team members up to northern Iraq in the Erbil area.
And in Baghdad, it appears Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki is losing his grip on power. Members of his own party and a growing number of military supporters are distancing themselves from his divisive rule. That could mean Iraq is heading toward a more inclusive government. Gary Lane, CBN News.
The three-day ceasefire between Israel and Hamas is approaching the final hours, and it may not last. Israeli leaders are warning they won't tolerate an enclave for terrorists in Gaza. John Wagi has more from Jerusalem on the war of words that could again become a shooting war.
The stakes are high for both sides. Gaza must rebuild from the pounding it has already taken, and Israelis are more than weary after a decade of rocket attacks that produce constant stress. But the chances of a long-lasting agreement don't look good. Israel's finance minister Yair Lapid says if Hamas doesn't agree to a ceasefire, Israel will strike harder than it did in the first wave of Operation Protective Shield. And Foreign Minister Avigdor Lieberman tells the Jerusalem Post that Israel must get rid of Hamas in order for there to be peace in the region. Whether Israel forges a temporary truce with Hamas or not, the country's leaders can count on another war from the Palestinians, a series of UN investigations and criminal charges in international courts. The UN has already named what some in Israel call a kangaroo court to investigate possible war crimes committed by the Israeli Defense Forces in Gaza. The appointed commission head, Canadian William Shabas, won't even say if he believes Hamas is a terror group. Jerusalem says it won't comply with the commission despite the UN's weak attempts to sound balanced.
Israel's duty to protect its citizens from rocket attacks by Hamas and other threats is beyond question. At the same time, the fighting has raised serious questions about Israel's respect for the principles of distinction and proportionality.
Hamas, meanwhile, tried to rally support among Gazans in case the most recent truce collapses, exposing the residents to another round of fighting. John Wagi, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Ukraine says it will block a convoy from Russia that Moscow claims is humanitarian aid. But many in Ukraine and the West have serious concerns about the convoy, which includes up to 280 trucks. Some believe it could be the precursor to a Russian invasion. NATO Secretary General has warned Russia could attack under the guise of a humanitarian operation. The controversy over the convoy has again increased tensions between Russia and Ukraine and raised the possibility of more military fighting. Pat?
Well, the Ukrainians have every right to study. I mean, this is a huge convoy of these trucks. They're sealed off. Do they contain troops? Do they contain weapons? Are they going to be headed for pro-Russian separatists in the Ukraine, and this would be the arms they need to fight? I mean, the Ukrainians wouldn't do what we wouldn't do here in this country. We wouldn't allow a convoy of 200 or so trucks to come just steaming across the border without some kind of inspection. And what the Ukrainians are saying, these ought to be handed over to the Red Cross and they ought to be checked, but every one of them needs to be inspected. There's no question about it. But it could launch some kind of a provocation. I think Putin is looking for a provocation to start a war. And again, this is something we need to do a lot of praying about. John?
Pat, turning to health news, a new study shows that being overweight or obese for kids as young as 2 to 6 years old could raise the risk for heart disease and diabetes. Live Science reports that the study from Italy found overweight or obese kids had at least one reading showing high blood pressure, high cholesterol, elevated blood sugar, or low levels of good cholesterol. Those readings have been linked to an increased risk of illnesses in adults like diabetes and heart disease. The results indicate that doctors should start screening children younger than many of them do now. And Pat, I should say doctors believe that early screening could help slow or reverse the harmful effects of early childhood obesity.
Well, of course it could. But you know the thing, ladies and gentlemen, little Johnny wants to scream and he'll have a temper tantrum because he wants his Fruit Loops or he wants his candy or he wants his ice cream. And Mommy and Daddy have got to say, look, kid, here are your carrot strips, be quiet. You know, the time has come. The parents, the child can't get junk food unless the parent gives it to him. And the junk food is causing these little kids to get fat and to get diabetes. Do you want to kill your kid? You aren't being loving to kill a kid. You say, oh, he's so sweet. I want to give him some cake and ice cream. Yeah, well, you want to kill him at the same time. You might as well be giving him a hand grenade to take to his crib. Wendy?
Or, you know, they can make it a special occasion to have that cookie or piece of cake, but not every day,
it's
right?
It's called a birthday once a year.
Okay, tough love, but it could save your life.
I mean, you got to do it. And, you know, children love fruit. One of my grandchildren, the kid eats so much fruit, it's unbelievable. You can't even keep the place stocked, but you want him to eat the fruit. It's wonderful. They eat grapes, they eat bananas, they eat apples, they eat them. And that's so good for them.
Absolutely, they do. They love it.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
All right, good advice.
The family of an American Christian detained in North Korea is pleading for his release. 56-year-old Jeffrey Edward Fowle has been detained for more than 2 months for so-called hostile acts against the country. He's suspected of leaving a Bible in a nightclub in the northern city of Chongjin. Fowle's wife and children, seen here with their attorney, apologized to the North Korean government asking for mercy. In a statement, the family said they're, quote, desperate for his release and return home. Military chaplains are upset that the Navy is removing Gideon Bibles from every hotel room on naval bases. The American Family Association says the move came in response to a letter from the Atheist Freedom from Religion Foundation. Ron Cruz, the director of the Chaplain Alliance for Religious Liberty, said a Bible in a hotel room is no more illegal than a chaplain in the military. It's tiresome to see senior military leaders needlessly cave in to activist groups offended by anything Christian. There are 34 Navy Lodge locations and 24,000 Navy Gateway guest rooms on naval bases worldwide. Well, you can always get the latest from CBN News by going to our website at cbnnews.com.